April was a deadly month for the United States in terms of new infections and deaths from the coronavirus. And those grim numbers weren't just limited to people's lives. The health of the world's largest economy is also in critical condition. Food prices rose at their fastest pace in April in more than 4 decades. One of the largest price spikes hit meat and poultry products. In the same month, the U.S.'s multi-billion-dollar meat industry saw an explosion of coronavirus cases at more than 100 plants across the country. Thousands have been infected and dozens have died. Fearing an unsafe work environment, many plants shut down, causing food prices to soar. And it's not just the U.S. Meat processing plants in Germany, Brazil, and other beef exporters saw outbreaks infecting hundreds of workers. So far, Turkey hasn't seen any major clusters within its food supply chain. But how long will that last? What precautions has Turkey taken to keep its food supply safe and prices stable? And to break that all down, joining me now from Cairo is Abeer Etefa, who is a spokesperson at the World Food Programme's Regional Bureau for the Middle East. And joining from Konya, we have Sevim Seda Yamac, who is an assistant professor at Konya Food and Agriculture University. Ladies, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you here. So, Abeer, how do you think the coronavirus has exposed the fragility of the world's food supply chain?
The coronavirus is posing a silent hunger pandemic that is sweeping across the world as we speak. It's basically sowing the seeds of a potential famine in its wake. WFP analysis is showing that we probably could have quarter billion people, 250 million people who could be facing severe hunger by the end of this year because of the consequences of the COVID-19. Many of those people are already in very fragile communities, already in conflict areas, in areas facing climate change effects. And, you know, this is another blow to them. They are very fragile, so they could not take any further shocks. So it certainly has shown also that the supply chain around the world is quite fragile, and we're seeing many places where even access to food is becoming an issue. And this is basically because the world is so interconnected. Yes. With high reliance on exports and imports.
Yeah. So, Sevim, we're in a troubled region. So how safe is Turkey's food supply chain at the moment, and what kind of measures have so far been taken to ensure price stability at least?
Well, until now, we saw that there is not so much big problem because. Actually, I would like to say that the agricultural product that we use is from the last year agricultural production. So now this year, we should take care about the agricultural activities to not face food scarcity for the next year, I mean. We should really take care agricultural activities. But however, I want to give some examples that for example, for the garlic, most of the garlic we imported from China, but now we stopped importing from the China. So the price almost 50% was increased.
Yes.
This was the reason. You know, the Turkish products. They increased the Turkish products. So now, we should see this problem to manage the next year. And for other crops, we have so much also. So they have a storage problem. We already store something, but if we cannot export it, that will be the problem also. You know, the balance is changed already, but we can manage it.
Yeah. On the other hand, one country that has seen its food supply hit hard by the coronavirus outbreak is the United States. I want to show some numbers. So there's a map of the meat and processing plants that have seen cases across the U.S. At 170 plants, there have been more than 5,000 cases of COVID-19, which resulted in the death of 20 people, workers. These people have reportedly transmitted the virus to more than 10,000 others. And yet, as a result, more than 20 meat plants were closed in April. But then the White House released a statement saying President Donald Trump is using the Defense Production Act to ensure the Americans have a reliable supply of products like beef, pork, and poultry. So, Abeer, can you talk on why the U.S.'s meat industry was so hard hit by the virus and if President Trump's measures have made it worse?
This is an area beyond really my expertise. We are mainly thinking and worrying about the fate of the millions and if not the 250 million people who will be facing severe hunger because of the COVID-19. In terms of the food industry, I think the impact is huge, and this is why we're seeing it touch and have a major effect on some of the countries that are net importers. And this is, you see it mainly in this region, in the Middle East region, where we are seeing around 6.7 million people who are at risk of severe hunger in these current circumstances and environment.
But how will this affect if the affected supply chain, if the workers at, for example, meat plants continue to be infected by the virus? Isn't that a big threat?
Of course, there is a big threat at all fronts, but it's if you look, for example, at the MENA region, we've, as I mentioned, at the Middle East region, we have an additional 6.7 million people who could soon be struggling to feed themselves. Okay. Why these 6.7 million? Because there are no savings. People are losing jobs, whether it is in the food sector or not. There are increasing food prices, and we already have seen reports of increasing food prices because of multiple factors, including cases like what you mentioned about, of course, infections in plants, or even the supply chain itself going weak because of the closed borders. And because of the extra precautions that you have now to take to get commodities from one country to the other. So there is also, with the governments facing huge loss in economy, the social safety net factors are, of course, weakening. And this is exposing the most vulnerable and the poor around the world to these extra shocks.
Unfortunately, Middle Eastern countries have always been more vulnerable. So Sevim, Germany, Brazil, and many other countries of other meat exporters, let's say, have also been hit. But we haven't heard such reports from Turkey. What has Turkey done differently so far?
As I mentioned, first of all, we should know that we have valuable natural sources for agriculture. So our main economy is going on with agriculture. So this was the one reason. And also, I want to say that our climate and the many other natural things is, it's useful for agricultural production. So therefore we didn't face for sure that and also the pandemic came late to Turkey. It was on March. So, this was one of the reasons. Now the agricultural production is starting. So we will see next year what will going on.
Okay. So Abeer, how to keep food supply chains moving under these circumstances?
There are two sides to this. The first thing is that we need to make sure that, precautions that are being taken not to spread the virus any further beyond borders should be taken into consideration while not disrupting the supply chain process. In addition, we have to focus our efforts on also mobilizing resources to continue to keep in mind the most vulnerable people. WFP Logistics Services at this moment is providing the backbone for global COVID-19 efforts to allow the humanitarian and health workers on the front line of the pandemic to stay and deliver. So we're launching air bridges. We're opening warehouses around the world, and specifically at this point in 3 different locations to allow for the transmission and to allow for the supply chain for the humanitarian operations to continue. Perhaps this needs to be looked into consideration for the wider economy. I think that also with the opening up right now, or the easing of some of these restrictions, we might see recovery. But for sure, the food prices have increased in many places around the world because of these gap holes in the supply chain process.
So how will and should this crisis, Sevim, change consumer habits in the food industry?
It will change so much. So we should be concentrated to be a self-sufficient country for agriculture, and for every country. So this changed many things. You know, the products that we belong to another country, we should manage in the countries that, like us, you know, Turkey can grow we can cultivate many types of crops. So now it's time to be self-sufficient. I want to give an example for Turkey also, that Turkey now has advantage to be the agricultural market, because we are connected to three continents: Africa, Asia, and Europe. So, you know, the supply chain is a problem, but we can manage from the Turkey because we are in the middle. We should make a new plan.
Yeah, I also hope that it's a wake-up call needed to reform how our food gets from farms to our table. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Ladies, thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk.